The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a sound that echoed through the enormous hall like thunder rolling across mountains, and Helen Price walked inside with her head held high, even though her stomach twisted with nervous energy that made her hands shake slightly at her sides. The chamber stretched upward for what seemed like miles, with walls made of some kind of glowing crystal that pulsed with soft blue light, and the ceiling disappeared into darkness far above where she could not see any end to it. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in curved rows that rose up like an amphitheater, and all of their strange eyes watched her as she walked down the long aisle toward the center platform, where she would have to stand alone and face their judgment. Helen had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for almost 10 years now, and in that time she had learned to read the body language of dozens of different species, even when they looked nothing like humans. The Vorath clicked their sharp mandibles together in a pattern she recognized as their version of mocking laughter, and their crystalline bodies reflected light in harsh angular patterns. The Eldrani, who existed as clouds of colored gas in their containment suits, swirled with deep purples and reds, which meant they felt satisfied about something, and that made Helen's heart sink even lower in her chest. A Koravani delegation sat perfectly still with their scaled faces showing no emotion at all, but their tail movements told her they were eager for what was about to happen. She reached the platform and turned to face them all, and the weight of their attention pressed down on her like a physical thing. Prime Arbiter Krell sat in the highest seat at the center of the chamber, and his four eyes blinked one after another in a slow cascade that meant he was thinking carefully about his words. His species was ancient and powerful, and he had led the council for longer than Helen had been alive. Krell's translator device hummed to life, and his words came out in perfect English, even though his mouth moved in ways that could never form human sounds. The council has completed its deliberations on the matter of Earth's continued membership, and we have reached a decision through the democratic process that all member species agreed to follow. When they joined this body many cycles ago, Helen felt her fingernails dig into her palms, but she kept her face calm and her voice steady. We await your decision, Prime Arbiter, and we trust that the Council has considered all the evidence we presented regarding humanity's contributions to galactic civilization over the past. Krell's eyes blinked again, and there was something in the pattern that might have been regret, or might have been nothing at all. The vote was conducted fairly, and the results were clear, with 43 species voting in favor of expulsion, and only 3 voting against, and humanity was required to abstain from voting on matters concerning itself as per Council regulations. Earth is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The words hit Helen like a punch to the gut, but she forced herself to breathe normally and keep standing straight. She had known this was possible, and the diplomatic reports over the past few months had warned her that sentiment was turning against Earth, but some part of her had hoped that reason would prevail in the end. "May I ask what charges we are being expelled for?" she said, and her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Ambassador." Threx of the Corvani Empire stood up from his seat, and his scales caught the light as he moved. "But you know perfectly well what the charges are, Ambassador Price, because we have discussed them in this chamber many times over the past year. Your species is violent, and you wage constant wars among yourselves. Even now, when you seek acceptance among civilized species, you deplete your planet's resources at an alarming rate. You cannot control your own population. Your technology is primitive compared to Council standards. You bring chaos wherever you go." Helen felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. "We have followed every single protocol required for Council membership, and we have honored every treaty we signed. We have contributed scientific research. We have participated in joint defense initiatives. We've opened trade relations with 17 member species. What more do you want from us?" "What we want," Threx said, and his voice dripped with contempt, "is for you to be what you are not. Have done the bare minimum required by regulations, but doing the minimum is not enough. Your culture is fragmented into hundreds of different nations that argue and fight. Your religions contradict each other and cause conflicts. Your economic systems create inequality. You are simply not ready for this responsibility, and perhaps you never will be." Helen looked around the chamber, searching for any allies who might speak up for humanity. Ambassador Lyra of the Centauri delegation met her eyes, and there was sympathy there, but Lyra remained silent in her seat. The representatives from the outer colonies, who had seemed friendly enough at social functions, now studied the floor, the ceiling, or anything except Helen's face. No one would risk council displeasure by defending Earth now that the vote was finished. If that is your final decision, then humanity will respect the council's authority, Helen said, and the words tasted bitter in her mouth. But I want everyone in this chamber to understand something about humans. We did not evolve on an easy world. We fought our way up from primitive conditions through ice ages and plagues and disasters. We learned to survive when survival seemed impossible. We do not give up when things become difficult. You are making a mistake by dismissing us. Krell's four eyes all focused on her at once. It sounds very much like a threat, Ambassador Price. It is not a threat, Prime Arbiter. It is a fact. Humanity will continue to grow and learn and advance whether the Council accepts us or not. We came to you seeking friendship and partnership. If you do not want that, then we will find another path forward. The chamber erupted in clicking and whistling and chemical signals that the translator systems could not fully capture, but Helen understood the general meaning. The aliens thought she was being arrogant and foolish. They thought humanity was nothing but an aggressive young species that would burn itself out within a few generations. Like so many others before them, Helen gathered her documents and her dignity and walked back down the long aisle toward the doors. No one spoke to her. No one tried to stop her. The massive doors opened again, and she passed through them into the corridor beyond and heard them boom shut behind her like the closing of a tomb. The shuttle ride back to Earth's orbital station took 2 hours, and Helen spent that time sitting alone in the passenger cabin, watching the stars slide past the viewport. Somewhere out there, 47 species had just decided that humanity was not worth their time or their respect. Somewhere out there, billions of humans were about to learn that they had been rejected by galactic civilization. Her communication console blinked with an incoming message, and she accepted it without looking to see who was calling. Director Greg Palmer's face appeared on the screen, and his expression was grim but determined. Helen, we heard what happened, and I want you to know that Earth is not going to accept this lying down. We've been preparing for this possibility. Come home, and we will show you what we have been working on. Helen felt something shift inside her chest and realized it was hope trying to kindle itself back to life. What kind of preparation, she asked. Greg smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. The kind that will make the Council regret their decision. Humanity does not beg for acceptance anymore. If they will not let us join their club, then we will build our own. The shuttle continued its journey back to Earth, and Helen watched her home planet grow larger in the viewport. That small blue world had produced a species that refused to quit no matter how many times they were knocked down. The Galactic Council had just learned that lesson, but Helen suspected they did not understand yet. What it truly meant, they would learn soon enough. 6 months had passed since the expulsion, and Director Greg Palmer stood in the operations center buried deep beneath the Colorado mountains, watching hundreds of screens. Display data streaming in from across the entire solar system. The room buzzed with activity as scientists and engineers and military personnel worked at their stations with focused intensity, and the air hummed with the sound of cooling systems working overtime to keep all the computers from overheating. Greg had barely slept in the past week, but he felt more alive than he had in years, because finally humanity was doing something instead of just waiting for aliens to decide their fate. Captain, Lisa Morgan approached him with a tablet in her hands. And her uniform was crisp, despite the fact that she had been working for 18 hours straight. Director Palmer, we have the latest status reports from all the major construction sites, and we think you are going to be pleased with the progress we have made. Greg turned away from the main display and focused his attention on her. Give me the numbers, Lisa, and do not sugarize anything because I need to know exactly where we stand. Mars colony construction is running ahead of schedule by almost 3 weeks, and we have broken ground on 3 new city centers that will be able to support populations of over 1 million people each. The atmospheric processors are working better than the engineers predicted, and we are seeing oxygen levels rise faster than our most optimistic projections. Population transfer from Earth is proceeding smoothly with voluntary migration exceeding our targets, and we should have 5 million permanent residents on Mars by the end of next quarter. Greg nodded and felt some of the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. What about the asteroid belt operations? Chief Engineer Danny Wright, who had been listening from his nearby station, pulled up a new set of displays showing the vast empty spaces between Mars and Jupiter, where thousands of asteroids tumbled through the darkness. The asteroid mining operations are exceeding every projection we made, Director Palmer. We have established 43 fully automated mining facilities on the largest asteroids in the AI. Systems we developed are running flawlessly. Resource extraction has tripled since we implemented the new protocols, and we are pulling out metals and rare elements faster than our refineries can process them. We have enough raw materials stockpiled to build whatever we need for the next 5 years. Greg allowed himself a small smile. The Council thought humanity was primitive and backward, but they had never seen what humans could accomplish when they were truly motivated. Show me the shipyard status. Lisa pulled up a 3-dimensional hologram that materialized in the air above her tablet, showing the massive construction facilities orbiting Earth and Mars and scattered throughout the belt. This is where things get really interesting, Director. We have completed the first production wave, and all vessels have passed their initial testing phases. 20 heavy cruisers are operational and combat-ready. 45 destroyer-class ships are finished, and crews are training on them now. 15 carrier vessels capable of launching fighter wings are in final systems. Checks. How long until the second wave is complete? Greg asked. 8 months for full deployment of the second wave, which will roughly double our current numbers. The new fusion drive systems we developed are performing beyond all specifications, and our ships are now faster than anything in the Council's standard fleet. According to the intelligence data we managed to acquire, we also installed the experimental shield generators on the latest models, and early tests show they can absorb energy weapon hits that would have destroyed our older designs. Greg studied the hologram and thought about what it represented. Each of those ships contained the hopes of billions of people who refused to be told they were not good enough. Each vessel was a statement that humanity would not simply fade away into obscurity. What about our diplomatic initiatives? He asked. Commander? Alan Hayes pulled up a star map that filled the entire wall, showing the galaxy in 3 dimensions with different colored dots, marking various territories and civilizations. Red dots indicated Council controlled space, which dominated the inner regions of the galaxy, where the oldest and richest worlds clustered together. Blue dots showed independent systems that were not part of the Council structure, and they were scattered throughout the outer regions, like islands in a vast ocean. We have made contact with 37 non-Council civilizations so far, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive. Most of these species have their own grievances with the Council that sound very similar to what we experienced. The Talvani were denied membership because the Council claimed their technology was not refined enough, even though their sensor systems are more advanced than anything the Council uses. The Goroth were rejected for being too militaristic, simply because their culture values strength and honor. The Prindaks were actually expelled like us because they refused to share their jump gate technology with the Council for free. Do they want to meet with us? Greg asked. All of them want to meet with us, Alan said, and his voice carried a note of excitement that was hard to miss. They have been waiting for someone to stand up to the Council and show that there are alternatives to just accepting whatever the Council decides. We have scheduled the first major conference for next month at Luna City, and representatives from 20 species have already confirmed they will attend. Greg walked over to the massive windows that looked out over the construction bay where Earth's newest and largest vessel was taking shape. The skeletal framework stretched nearly 2 kilometers from end to end, and construction drones swarmed over it like glowing insects, welding and assembling and installing systems. This ship would be the flagship of Earth's fleet, and it would carry a message to the galaxy that humanity was done asking for permission. We are not just building a fleet, Lisa said quietly as she joined him at the window. We are building an alternative to the entire Council system. That is exactly right, Greg replied. The The Council operates on the principle that older species know better and younger species should follow their rules and accept their judgment. But what if there was a different way? What if species could cooperate as equals, instead of having some elite group decide who is worthy, eh? Technician called out from across the operations center. Director Palmer, we have an incoming transmission from the Talvani Confederation, and they say it is urgent. They are asking if we can move the conference date up by 2 weeks. Greg exchanged glances with Lisa and Alan. Tell them we will be ready in 3 days, and ask them to send us the details of what has them so concerned. Lisa, I want you to prep the new flagship for its first real voyage. We are going to Luna City, and we are going to show our future allies exactly what humanity can do when we put our minds to something. The operations center erupted into coordinated chaos as orders were given and confirmed, and personnel scrambled to prepare for an accelerated timeline. Greg watched it all happen and felt a fierce pride in what his species had accomplished in just 6 months. The Council had expelled Earth thinking that humans would slink away in shame and give up on their dreams of joining galactic civilization. Instead, humanity had mobilized every resource and every talent and every ounce of determination they possessed. Nations that had argued for centuries put aside their differences. Corporations that had competed viciously began cooperating. Scientists shared their research freely. Engineers worked around the clock. And slowly but surely, a new power was rising from the small blue planet that the Council had dismissed. Greg turned back to the star map and studied the blue dots scattered across the outer galaxy. Each one represented a species that had been rejected or ignored or pushed aside by the Council. Each one was looking for something better. And now, Earth was offering them exactly that. The Council thought they had ended humanity's story by expelling them. They had no idea that they had actually just written the first chapter of something much bigger. Something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. In 8 hours, the flagship would launch on its maiden voyage. In 3 days, humanity would sit down with dozens of other species and begin building something new. And the Council, sitting in their ancient chamber, on their comfortable worlds, would finally begin to understand what they had unleashed when they told humanity they were not good enough. Greg smiled as he watched Earth rotate slowly beyond the windows. His species had always thrived when facing impossible odds. The Council was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The conference hall on Luna City had been constructed specifically for this historic meeting, and the engineers had worked miracles to make it ready in just 3 days. The massive chamber contained atmosphere processors that could maintain 17 different environmental conditions simultaneously, so that species who breathed methane could sit next to species who needed high-pressure nitrogen and neither would suffer any discomfort. Translation systems lined the walls, humming quietly as they processed thousands of different languages and communication methods ranging from spoken words to chemical signals to patterns of light. Helen Price stood at the central podium looking out at the assembled delegates and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders, because what happened in this room over the next few days would determine the future of not just humanity, but dozens of other species who had been cast aside by the galactic establishment. The delegates represented an incredible variety of life forms that would have seemed impossible to Helen just a few years ago. The Talvani resembled giant insects with glossy black exoskeletons and delicate antennae that quivered constantly as they sensed the air around them. The Goroth looked like living crystals that refracted light into rainbow patterns and communicated through vibrations that the translation systems converted into speech. The Prindax existed as colonies of smaller organisms that flowed together, the larger forms that constantly shifted and changed shape. There were species with too many limbs and species with no limbs at all, and species that defied easy description because they were so utterly alien to human experience. Helen activated the podium controls, and the voice was transmitted to every delegate in their own preferred method of communication. Thank you all for coming to Luna City on such short notice. I know many of you traveled great distances to be here, and I want you to know that Earth appreciates the trust you have shown by accepting our invitation. 6 months ago, my species was expelled from the Galactic Council. They called us aggressive and primitive and unworthy of membership among civilized species. I suspect that many of you have heard similar words directed at your own people. A chorus of clicks and whistles and chemical bursts filled the hall as the delegates expressed their agreement. Ambasado. Our Crix of the Talvani leaned forward in her specially designed seat, and her antennae pointed directly at Helen. Those are fine words, Ambassador Price, but words are cheap in galactic politics. What exactly are you proposing that we do about our situation? Are you suggesting we form another council that will simply become a different group of elites who look down on everyone else? Helen shook her head firmly. No, Ambassador Crix, that is exactly what we do not want to create. The council's fundamental problem is not the species who belong to it, but the structure itself. They operate on a hierarchy where older species have more power, and newer species must prove themselves worthy. They hoard technology and restrict trade and make decisions that affect everyone, but only allow a select few to vote. We propose something completely different. We propose the coalition of independent systems where every member species retains. We share technology freely instead of keeping it locked away. We establish mutual defense agreements so that threatening one member means facing all of us. We create open trade networks that benefit everyone. And most importantly, we make decisions by consensus, where every voice matters, equally regardless of how old your civilization is or how many. Planets you control, General Vorn of the Gorath. Delegation vibrated in a pattern that the translators rendered as deep skepticism. The Council will never allow this to exist. They will see us as a direct threat to their power structure, and they will move to eliminate us before we become strong enough to challenge them. Helen had been expecting this objection. They already see us as threats, General Vorn. That is why most of us are here instead of sitting in the council chamber. But together we are not just threats. We are an alternative. We are proof that the Council's way is not the only way to organize galactic civilization. They can try to stop us, but that would require them to go too. War against dozens of species simultaneously, and wars are expensive and unpredictable, and the Council has grown comfortable in their power over the centuries, Captain. Lisa Morgan stepped up to the podium beside Helen and activated a holographic display that filled the air above. The delegates showing star maps and trade routes and defensive networks. Humanity has spent the last 6 months building infrastructure throughout our solar system, and we are prepared to share everything we have developed. Our fusion technology can power your cities and ships more efficiently than most systems in Council space. Our artificial intelligence systems can run complex operations with minimal oversight. Our medical advances have extended human lifespans by 30% in the last decade. Our manufacturing techniques can produce goods faster and cheaper than traditional methods. In return, we hope to learn from each of you and incorporate your innovations into our own. Civilization Ambassador Crix's antenna quivered with interest. You would share your technology freely without demanding payment or political concessions. That is correct, Helen confirmed. The coalition operates on the principle that raising everyone's capabilities benefits all of us. A strong neighbor is better than a weak one because we can accomplish more together than we ever could separately. General Vorn vibrated again, and this time the translation came through as grudging respect. Pretty words again, Ambassador Price, but what about military support? The Council has thousands of ships, and if they decide to enforce their will through force, what exactly can this coalition do to stop them? Greg Palmer, who had been standing quietly at the side of the room, now walked forward to join Helen at the podium. General Vorn, that is a fair question, and it deserves a direct answer. Humanity has built 87 combat-capable warships in the past 6 months, and we are constructing more every week. Our shipyards are operating at full capacity. We have trained crews ready to deploy. We have developed weapons and shields that match or exceed Council technology in several key areas. But we are not interested in conquest or aggression. We want to build and explore and grow. If the Council leaves us alone, we will. Leave them alone and focus on our own development. And if they do not leave us alone, Vorn pressed, then they will discover that humanity fights. Extremely well when we are cornered, Greg said flatly. We did not claw our way to the top of Earth's food chain by running away from challenges. But more than that, they will discover that the coalition stands together. Attack one of us, and you attack all of us. That is not a threat, General. It is simply the reality of what we are building here. The conference continued for 3 intense days. Delegates argued about trade agreements and technology-sharing protocols and defensive strategies. Engineers from different species gathered in side rooms to exchange designs and compare notes on their various innovations. Diplomats drafted treaty language and debated the exact wording of key provisions. Military commanders sat together studying star charts and planning how to coordinate their forces if the need ever arose. There were disagreements and misunderstandings and moments when it seemed like the whole thing might fall apart because the cultural differences were simply too great to bridge. But slowly and carefully, a framework began to emerge. Species that had been isolated for decades found common cause with others who shared their struggles. The Talvani offered their advanced sensor technology that could detect ships across vast distances. The Gorith contributed their revolutionary energy shield designs that could absorb incredible amounts of damage. The Prendax agreed to share their jumpgate technology that allowed faster travel between star systems. And humanity provided the industrial capacity and military backbone that could tie everything together into a coherent whole. On the final day of the conference, 23 species signed the founding charter of the Coalition of Independent Systems. Each ambassador affixed their mark to the document using methods appropriate to their species, and as Helen watched them sign, she felt something profound shifting in the galaxy. The Council had dominated galactic politics for 3,000 years, operating on the assumption that they alone knew how civilization should be organized. Now, a group of species they had, dismissed as unworthy, was proving that there were other paths forward. Helen stood at the observation window after the signing ceremony, watching Earth hang in the black sky. Above Luna City's gray surface, that small blue world had been rejected and dismissed and told it would never amount to anything in galactic civilization. But from that world had come the spark that ignited something new, something that might just change everything. The alert sirens woke Greg Palmer at 3 in the morning, and he was out of bed and pulling on his uniform before his mind fully registered what was happening. Years of military training had programmed his body to respond instantly to emergency signals, and by the time he reached the command center 5 minutes later, his head was clear and his thoughts were sharp and focused. The massive room was already buzzing with activity as night shift. Personnel worked frantically at their stations, and the main display screen showed tactical information streaming in from across Coalition Space. Commander Alan Hayes met him at the entrance, looking grim and tired. Director Palmer, we have a situation developing fast. 3 Council warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Talvani territory approximately 40 minutes ago. They are broadcasting demands that the Talvani dissolve their alliance with the Coalition immediately or face economic sanctions and potential military action. Greg felt his jaw tighten as he processed this information. Sanctions. They are threatening one of our allies with consequences for choosing to associate with us. It gets worse, Sir, Alan said as he pulled up additional displays showing star maps with multiple red indicators flashing. We are receiving similar reports from 4 other Coalition member systems. Council ships have appeared at the Gorath homeworld and near Prendak space, and at 2 other locations. This is a coordinated operation designed to test our response and probably to break up the Coalition before we become too strong to intimidate. Greg moved to the Central Command Console and began pulling up fleet status reports. What is the current disposition of our forces, Captain Lisa Morgan? Peered at his shoulder with a tablet already showing the information he needed. We have 40 ships within immediate striking range of Talvani space. Another 60 vessels could reach that system within 6 hours if we push the engines hard. The Talvani themselves have 12 defensive platforms orbiting there. Homeworld and 8 patrol ships, but they are significantly outgunned by the 3 Council vessels even before we factor in the technological advantages the Council ships possess. Greg studied the tactical display and ran calculations in his head. The Council was making a move they had clearly planned carefully. Show up in force at multiple locations simultaneously. Make demands. Force the Coalition to either back down and look weak, or spread their forces thin, trying to protect everyone. It was a classic intimidation tactic, and it would probably work against most newer civilizations. But Earth had not survived thousands of years of warfare by backing down when threatened. Get me a secure channel too, Ambassador. Cricks right now, Greg? Ordered. Then I want battle groups Alpha through Delta scrambled and ready for immediate hyperspace jump to Talvani space. Full combat readiness. Load all weapons. Charge all shields. I want those ships ready to fight, Sir Alan said carefully. If we send our fleet to confront Council forces, this stops being a political dispute and becomes a shooting war. Are we really prepared to go that far? They already made it a war when they showed up threatening our allies, Greg replied. They just have not fired the first shot yet. We need to show them that threatening Coalition members means dealing with all of us together. If we do nothing here, the Coalition falls apart, and everything we built becomes meaningless. 20 minutes later, Helen Price was on the communication screen from the diplomatic station orbiting Earth. Her hair was messy from being woken suddenly, and she still wore her sleeping clothes, but her eyes were alert and sharp. Greg, the Council is claiming through their official channels that this is just a routine inspection of Talvani military capabilities. They say we are overreacting and looking for excuses to play at being a military power. Do you believe that is all this is? Greg asked. Not for 1 second, Helen replied. They are probing our response to see if we have the courage to actually stand behind our alliance agreements. If we do nothing, they will push harder at each member system until the Coalition crumbles from internal fear. If we push back too aggressively, they get to claim we are the violent aggressors they always said we were, and they get propaganda value from it, so we need to be strong enough to make them back down, but careful enough not to give them ammunition to use against us. Greg said. Exactly, Helen confirmed. Show strength, but do not fire unless they fire first. Make it clear that we will defend our allies, but that we are not looking for a fight. The Earth fleet arrived in Talvani space 18 hours after the initial alert, and Captain Jason Cole commanded the lead vessel. From the bridge of the Earth ship Unity, which was one of the new heavy cruisers that represented the peak of human military engineering. The ship stretched nearly 800 meters from bow to stern and bristled with missile launchers and energy weapons and the most advanced sensors humanity had ever built. 40 ships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, and their sudden appearance lit up every sensor in the system. Jason opened a communication channel to the Council vessels that hung in space near Talvana's outer planets. Council vessels, this is Captain Jason Cole of the Coalition Defense Fleet. You are currently in violation of Talvani sovereignty. I am ordering you to withdraw from this system immediately. The response came quickly, and Admiral Torix's scaled face appeared on the main view screen. His species was Corvani, and Jason could see the contempt written clearly in his expression and body language. Earthship, you have no authority in this system. The Talvani fall within Council jurisdiction for inspection purposes. Your presence here is unnecessary and unwelcome. The Talvani are sovereign members of the Coalition of Independent Systems, Jason replied, keeping his voice level and professional. Your presence here without their invitation constitutes an act of aggression. We are here to ensure their sovereignty is respected. Admiral Torix's eyes narrowed. Humanity continues to forget its place. You were expelled from the Council for good reason, and now you play at building empires with other reject species. This will not be tolerated by the galactic community, Admiral. You have 1 hour to withdraw your ships from this system, Jason said. After that deadline passes, we will consider your continued presence a hostile act, and we will respond accordingly to protect our ally. The Corvani Admiral's face darkened with anger. You dare threaten Council forces, boy? We have 10,000 warships across the galaxy. You have barely 100. This is suicide for your pathetic little alliance, maybe Jason acknowledged. But we will take 3 of your ships with us before we go down. And then you will have to explain to your superiors and to the Council why you started a war that could have been avoided by simply respecting another species' sovereignty. Your choice, Admiral Torix. 1 hour. Jason closed the communication channel and turned to his crew. All stations remain at battle readiness. Weapons charged but not locked on targets yet. Shields at maximum. If they make any aggressive moves, I want us ready to respond instantly. Lieutenant Sophie Grant, who served as his tactical officer, spoke quietly from her station. Sir, do you think he will actually back down? Jason watched the tactical display, where the 3 Council ships held their position near the gas giant in Talvani's outer system. He has to back down, Sophie. He came here expecting the Talvani to fold immediately and expecting us to stay home and do nothing. Now he is facing 40 Coalition warships in a fight that serves absolutely no strategic purpose, except to satisfy his pride. He is a military commander, not a politician, and military commanders understand that. Pointless battles are how you lose wars. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Every person on every Coalition ship remained at their station, watching their screens and waiting, see if they were about to fight the first battle between the Coalition and the Council. The Talvani defensive platforms powered up their weapons just in case. The 8 Talvani patrol ships moved into formation behind the Earth fleet, and the 3 Council vessels hung in space. It's not advancing, but not retreating either. With 5 minutes remaining on the deadline, Admiral Torix's face appeared on the screen. Again. Captain Cole, the Council will remember this insolence. You are making enemies you cannot afford to have. We are defending our allies, Admiral, Jason replied. That is something you might consider trying sometime. Instead of just throwing your weight around. The 3 Council ships engaged their hyperspace drives and vanished from Talvani space, leaving only the faint radiation signatures that marked where they had been. Across Coalition space, similar scenes played out at each location where Council forces had appeared. Earth ships arrived in strength every time. Council commanders made threats, and when faced with actual resistance, instead of immediate submission, the Council forces withdrew without firing a shot. In the command center on Earth, Greg Palmer watched the reports come in. From all the confrontation points, every single Council force had backed down. No shots had been fired, but everyone involved understood what had just happened. The Coalition had passed its first real test, and the Council had learned that threatening Coalition members would not be easy or cheap. 1 full year had passed since Earth's expulsion from the Galactic Council, and now Helen Price found herself walking back into the grand chamber that had been the site of humanity's greatest humiliation. This time, however, everything was different, because she did not enter alone as a supplicant, begging for acceptance, but as the lead diplomat of the Coalition of Independent Systems, accompanied by representatives from 23 different species who walked beside her as equals. The Council had called this emergency summit and officially labeled it as a dialogue on galactic cooperation. But everyone in the chamber understood what it really meant. The Council needed to deal with the Coalition, because ignoring them was no longer possible. Prime Arbiter Krell watched their procession with an expression that Helen could not quite read even. After all her years of studying alien body language Ambassador Price, thank you for accepting our invitation to this summit. We appreciate that you and your coalition colleagues were willing to travel here too. Discuss these important matters. Helen stopped at the center of the chamber and looked up at Krell with a calm confidence she had not possessed a year ago. Thank you, Prime Arbiter, for extending the invitation. The Coalition is always willing to engage in diplomatic dialogue with any party that approaches us in good faith. The chamber itself had been reconfigured. Since Helen's last visit, and the change was small but significant, instead of the traditional arrangement where council members sat in elevated positions looking down on petitioners, the seating was now arranged in concentric circles that put everyone at roughly the same level. It was a symbolic gesture, but symbols mattered in galactic politics. Krell activated the chamber's systems, and his voice carried to every corner of the vast space. This summit has been convened to address the tensions that have developed over the past year between the Galactic Council and the Coalition of Independent Systems. We have witnessed unprecedented changes in the political landscape of our galaxy. Earth has constructed a substantial military fleet. Multiple independent species have formed a formal alliance structure. Traditional trade routes have shifted. The established order that has maintained peace for 3,000 years has been disrupted. Ambassador Threx of the Corvania Empire rose from his seat, and his scales caught the light as he gestured dramatically. Let us stop dancing around the real issue, Prime Arbiter. Humanity was expelled from this council because they were not ready for the responsibilities of galactic civilization. Instead of accepting our judgment with humility and working to improve themselves, they built a rival power structure and recruited other malcontents to their cause. This is exactly the kind of aggressive and reckless behavior that justified their expulsion in the first place. Helen kept her voice steady and diplomatic. With respect, Ambassador Threx, we did exactly what any species would do when faced with rejection. We found others who shared our circumstances, and we built something new together. You cannot condemn us for refusing to simply disappear after you decided we were unworthy. You could have worked within the existing system, Krell suggested. The Council has processes for readmission and for specie ease to prove they have grown beyond their previous limitations. What system? Helen replied, and allowed some of her frustration to show. For over 100 years, humanity petitioned for full Council membership. We met every single requirement you established. We followed every regulation. We honored every treaty. And we were still expelled based on prejudice rather than facts. You judged us not on what we accomplished, but on your preconceptions about young species. A murmur spread through the Council delegates, and several of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ambassador Lyra of the Centauri, who had always been sympathetic to Earth, spoke up from her position. She is not entirely wrong, Prime Arbiter. I raised concerns about our membership process 5 years ago and proposed reforms to make it more equitable. My proposal was voted down 42-5. We claim to represent galactic civilization, but we only represent the oldest and most established powers. We have become exclusive rather than inclusive. Krell raised one of his hands, calling for order. This summit is not intended as a forum for criticizing Council internal policies. We are here to discuss the current situation. Greg Palmer stood up from his seat in the Coalition delegation. Actually, Prime Arbiter, it is about exactly that. The Council faces a choice that will define its future. You can continue operating as you have for the past 3,000 years, maintaining your power by keeping younger species dependent and divided. Or you can adapt to a changing galaxy where other models of cooperation are proving successful. And if we refuse to change, Threx challenged. Then the Coalition will continue to grow, Greg said simply. We have no desire for conflict, but we will defend ourselves and our allies. We will continue to trade and share technology and expand our influence. With or without Council approval or recognition, you cannot rival our strength, Threx insisted. We have thousands of warships. We control hundreds of systems. We possess technology that has been refined over millennia. Your little alliance is nothing compared to our power. Helen stepped forward. And we have something you have forgotten, Ambassador Threx. We have hunger. We have drive. We have the desperation of species that must innovate or be left behind. The Council has grown comfortable in its power. You maintain the status quo, because change threatens your position. But the galaxy does not stand still for anyone. Krell's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he considered her words. What exactly is the Coalition? Proposing Ambassador Price. Surely you are not. Suggesting we simply disband the Council and join your new organization. Helen activated a holographic display that materialized. In the center of the chamber, showing a new vision for galactic organization, the Coalition is willing to work with the Council, not as members and not as subordinates, but as partners. We propose a 2-tier system where the Council maintains its current structure for its existing member species, while the Coalition operates independently in parallel. We establish formal diplomatic relations. We create open trade agreements. We share certain technologies through negotiated exchanges. We develop joint scientific research initiatives where both sides can benefit. But each organization maintains its sovereignty and its independence. Threx made a dismissive gesture. Separate but equal. You want us to legitimize your rebellion by treating you as though you deserve the same respect as civilizations that have existed for thousands of years. Not separate. But equal, Helen corrected. Separate but cooperative. We acknowledge that the Council has wisdom and experience that comes from age. But you must acknowledge that younger species bring innovation and fresh perspectives. Both approaches have value, and when conflicts arise between Council space and Coalition space, Krell asked, who arbitrates those disputes? Greg pulled up another display showing a proposed framework. We establish a joint committee made up of representatives from both the Council and the Coalition. Equal numbers from each side. When disputes occur, they are brought before this committee and resolved through dialogue and negotiation rather than through force or unilateral decisions. The chamber erupted into heated debate. Some council members were outraged at the suggestion that they needed to negotiate with species they considered inferior. Others saw the practical benefits of establishing formal relations rather than allowing tensions to escalate. The Coalition delegates watched and waited, maintaining their unified position, while the Council argued among themselves about how to respond after hours of discussion. Krell called for a recess, and he met privately. With Helen and Greg in a side chamber, you have put us in an impossible position, Prime Arbiter said quietly. If we refuse your proposal, you continue to grow, and we appear weak for not being able to stop you. If we agree to your framework, we legitimize what many of our members view as a rebellion against proper authority. This is not a rebellion, Helen replied. This is evolution. The galaxy is far larger and more diverse than the Council ever acknowledged. There are hundreds of species trying to find their place in galactic civilization. They do not need your permission to exist or to cooperate with each other. Krell was silent for a long moment, and all 4 of his eyes focused on Helen. The Council was created 3,000 years ago to bring order to a galaxy that was tearing itself apart through constant warfare. We were meant to be guardians of peace and stability. Then guard it, Greg said. But do not smother it under rigid hierarchies and outdated prejudices. The Coalition is not your enemy unless you choose to make us one. We are simply offering an alternative path for species that do not fit your traditional model. The summit continued for 3 more exhausting days. Diplomats argued over specific language and proposed treaties. Lawyers debated jurisdiction and authority. Military advisors discussed how to prevent accidental conflicts. Scientists proposed collaborative research projects. And slowly, painfully, a framework began to emerge that neither side loved, but both could accept. The final agreement established formal diplomatic relations between the Galactic Council and the Coalition of Independent Systems. Trade would be open between both zones. Technology sharing would be negotiated on a case-by-case basis. A joint arbitration committee would handle disputes. Each organization would respect the sovereignty of the other. It was not perfect, and there were still deep tensions and mistrusts on both sides, but it was a beginning as Helen walked out of the chamber for what she knew would not be the last time. Ambassador Lyra caught up with her. You did it, Lyra said with genuine admiration. 1 year ago, you were expelled in disgrace. Today, you forced the Council to recognize the Coalition as a legitimate power. Helen smiled. We are not equals yet, Ambassador Lyra, but we will be. Given time, back on Earth, celebrations erupted in every city as news of the summit's results spread. Humanity had been told they were not good enough, and in response, they had built their own path forward. Director Greg Palmer stood in the operations center watching the celebrations on screens, and Captain Lisa Morgan joined him. We actually did it, she said softly. We survived, Greg replied. Now comes the truly hard part, which is building something that lasts, and proving that our way can work just as well as theirs. Outside, the Earth turned slowly in space, that same small blue planet. That had been rejected and dismissed. But from that world had come the courage to say no to those who claimed superiority. From that world had come the determination to build rather than beg. And from that world had come proof that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in being accepted by the powerful, but in having the courage to create your own path when they turn you away.